everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Eggs. Today's special guest is Jose Berlanga, CEO and founder at Houstonian Capital. Welcome to the show. Jose, how are you?
Hey, Ryan and Mike. Wonderful. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me as a guest in your show.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No problem.
Yeah, thrilled to have you. Thanks so much for making time for us.
Exactly. Ryan's introduction is very short and to the point. You want to tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you come from, how you got started in what you do and what you do?
Absolutely. Yes. Well, I'm one of those famous entrepreneurs, what they call us, entrepreneurs. I've been one of those for many, many years, relentlessly, through good years and bad years. I was just mentioning that I've started in business about close to 40 years when I started my first business. And one has led to the other. And for some reason, I have not had a chance to take a break in between enterprises. So it's been a wonderful journey. It's been an exhausting journey full of ups and downs and setbacks and having to start all over. But yes, I'm an entrepreneur, builder, developer, investor. Now I'm a writer and a speaker, which is probably beginning to be the most interesting and most fun part of my career after having to just be an operator, and a day-to-day operator, which can be tiring. So trying to go in a different direction nowadays.
Yeah, I love that.
Do you focus on a specific, I mean, you've been in business, but I'm sure you specialize. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do for business?
Yes, absolutely. My specialty really has been real estate because that's probably where the bulk of my time and my activities revolve around. Residential construction, residential developments, land development. Now I do a lot of commercial investing, multifamily, so on and so forth. But I've never really stopped dabbling in a great number of industries. I've noticed, I guess, at some age, at a relatively young age, that once you understand the language of entrepreneurship, balance sheet, profit and loss, in start adapting to some parameters of each industry, they all have very close similarities. Yes, you certainly need to get familiar with each individual niche market and industry and sector. But as you guys know very well, once you embark on this entrepreneurship journey and you start understanding the fundamentals, you can start getting into a number of different things and relatively quickly get into understanding the basics and so on and so forth. So yes, but real estate, but I love all business. You name it. There's not many that I probably haven't been involved in.
Great.
Love it.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about just sort of maybe getting started. So you mentioned, that you've been doing this for more than 40 years, which means you were probably a pretty young man getting started. You mentioned before we got online that you've got family from Spain, and I certainly don't know everything about Spanish culture, but I'm pretty familiar. And in my experience anyway, with people of the older generation in Spain, it doesn't seem that entrepreneurship is as strongly encouraged as it's becoming today. And so I wonder if you'd talk a little bit about your upbringing and, were you inspired by an entrepreneurial family? How did you get your start?
Yes. We're talking about, some of my background is from Spain, but I'm a native of Mexico. I grew up in Mexico City. My family was there. I grew up there, one of the largest cities in the world, as we know. And I was exposed to a number of people, including my father, who were not the true definition of entrepreneurs. I think that word back there in the 70s, where I was growing up and observing people execute these type of activities, they were more known as, let's call it businessmen. Okay, people that went out. I was very, very intrigued by the whole concept of becoming a businessman without truly understanding the ins and outs of even the definition of entrepreneurship. What I love was seeing my dad get up early, get dressed, wear a suit, the old school image of a businessman, leave with his briefcase, ready for a meeting. And I always had that image of the go-getter, the person that would go and make things happen from an early age To my surprise, of course, as I grew up and started getting much more involved in entrepreneurship, I realized how much more there is than just going out there and closing deals. The execution, the startup process, putting things together, assembling your team, understanding your concept, the procedures, the guidelines, the day to day, the financial aspects, and the tediousness of operating businesses. Never in a million years back then did I truly understand the depth and the difficulties that represent particularly small businesses, the early stages, trying to put them together, trying to build them. So that's how, yes, I always believed that was going to be my journey, and I went for it, and here I am. Somehow it worked out.
Can can you maybe tell us about your first kind of foray into real estate or business in general? I mean, coming in from Mexico City, and then I'm sure you probably started a business down there, but when you relocated to the States, how did you go about building your business? How did you go about investing in real estate?
Well, interestingly enough, real estate came about much later. I had already been in business over 10 years.
Okay.
And so although I had that itch, the idea of becoming an entrepreneur and starting a business from day one, literally I could not wait. I started attending the University of St. Thomas here in Houston, and simultaneously I started working. That was what I wanted. I was never a very good student. I graduated somehow. I'm proud to say. I didn't even think I was going to go that far, but somehow I got several degrees. But immediately I started looking at opportunities. And the first one that came about was the industry where my dad had been involved with for so many years, the oil and gas, which was one of the reasons also why we kept visiting Houston.
Okay.
It was my second home since I could remember. He used to travel back and forth to visit manufacturers and vendors. And so he was in the exporting of valves and piping for the oil and gas industry. So that's where I started. I started back then. It was a very interesting industry because there, without the internet, without a lot of information, all the plants, petrochemical plants, and the industry in general needed a purchasing agent in the U.S. that would help them facilitate the maintenance and the purchasing of parts and in all kinds of machinery for the oil and gas. And I started very small, just trying to sell valves, but it evolved before I knew it, little by little, traveling to Mexico, visiting different companies. And before you know it, I was exporting a whole lot of other stuff, from other than valves and piping. I was transformers and I was motors and compressors and reactors and electrical panels and batteries and you name it, an array of maintenance lists of things that people had back then to operate their plants. And they didn't speak English and they didn't have someone that could make this an easy process. So that worked out. I mean, I actually thought I would retire doing that until the economy started changing and payments began to be delayed. And long story short, they put me out of business just through economic changes and the lack of timely payment in that industry became very difficult to keep up with. So I had to start all over, in a different industry. But I really thought I would remain in something related to the exporting business because of the bicultural background and speaking the languages and understanding a little bit about the industry worked very well, of course, until it didn't. So there we go, trying to start again, and one business led to another.
Love it.
And I think that's a great tale too, in terms of just sort of resiliency. So maybe we'll pivot from there to your next, sort of line of business and where you went from there. Because I think that, this is something that a lot of people are affected with in one way or another. We just recently had an election. There will certainly be changes of policy. This will affect jobs. This will affect industries. This will affect all these things. And this happens every 4 years or every, 8 years or whatever in this country. And so there's these kinds of things, regulatory changes, things like that start to negatively affect business. resiliency, I mean, I think it's an American characteristic. Obviously, you've shown this is not just a strictly American characteristic, but the ability to be, I guess, versatile or able to kind of be resilient in the face of something that's pretty scary. I mean, I imagine at the level of business that you were at, just based on your description, there was, probably real dollars coming in. This was a lot of money we're talking about, and then just poof, it's gone. And now all of a sudden, either you're left holding the bag or you've got to go find a new way to replace your income. And so could we talk about just, I guess, resiliency as a theme here, I guess, and then how the, those sorts of characteristics in you as a person and you as an entrepreneur, sort of carried you into your next venture.
Absolutely. And I do believe that resilience is one of the main characteristics that any entrepreneur should have. We fantasize about owning and operating our business without realizing that in reality, there's more bad days than good days, and there's more bad things happening throughout the course of time while building a business than what anybody imagines until you're in it. And you have to have that endurance, let's call it, the mental strength to tolerate endless setbacks. And it and it occurs even when the business is going well. Obviously, even more when the business is going bad. I have to admit that when my business, like you mentioned, became a multi-million-dollar operation and I was making a lot of money at a very young age, losing it, trying to salvage that business and reinvesting money, trying to keep it alive, was devastating. It was a very, very difficult period of time. People think that when you have that ability to put businesses together, you can just bounce back right away. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. It was depressing. It was sad. It was difficult. I didn't know what was going to happen with the rest of my life. It didn't happen overnight. So I went through this process, which I always recommend to people, to really know that it's okay to feel the pain of defeat, of things going wrong. Just know that you have to keep going and that you have to try again and utilize that experience, because part of entrepreneurship is to utilize those bad experiences to gradually start getting closer to a better experience next time, and figure out how to reduce your probabilities of failure. That is an integral part. For entrepreneurship is much more about taking the punches, about having that attitude of not about success, not about money, not about doing well all the time. Anybody can do that. The secret is how much tolerance to difficult days and difficult setbacks do you have, and continue to move forward. So what I didn't realize, because yes, it was very devastating at first, I didn't realize that somehow while I was operating this business, I was building a pretty good reputation and a name for myself as someone reliable, as someone punctual, as someone who was always working in doing interesting things. So when I thought that all the doors had closed on me, sooner or later, there were opportunities that started coming my way, because although I didn't realize the know-how I had at the time, I felt that my know-how was very specific to that industry. People around were starting to observe me at a very young age as someone accountable, someone that knew how to put deals together at that age. And I started getting other opportunities offered to me. Hey, I'm starting this business, and I know that you know about business. There are so many types of entrepreneurs that are not necessarily business savvy. They might be more technical or more artistic, or they might have some concept, but they don't know how to take it off the ground, or how to take it to market, and how to put the parts of the business together in order to make it functional. And that's where little by little I started getting back into the business world. But that wasn't the only time. I mean, I kept failing over and over. I'm going to admit that it never got easier. But one of these businesses would fail, and then there was another one that started doing well, and so on and so forth. I kept just moving forward and assuming that this is the way it is. I didn't feel like there was much of a choice but to keep trucking, as they say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've done this a few times. I think Ryan's done this before as well. But there's a point in your career, especially as an entrepreneur. Both Ryan and I are both serial entrepreneurs. We'd rather work for ourselves than the man. But
Yeah.
uh, as an entrepreneur, there's times when you have to kind of realize that it just isn't working, and then you have to pivot and figure out your next move. And from based off of your story, it sounds like you've done that a few times. Can you maybe talk about that pivot and the process of um, deciding what to do next? As a salesperson, you kind of develop natural skills that will help you throughout your life, and as a business person, um, but you got to know when it's time to pull the plug. You can't just keep kicking a dead horse and telling it to get you to town. Um, can you maybe talk about a pivot in your life, maybe going from your business in Mexico to real estate and learning real estate and how to invest in it? You've written a book on real estate and the business of home building. Can you maybe talk about your ventures in that world?
Of course, of course. Now that real estate is a big part of my life, I don't believe that in many occasions we make choices. Sometimes those choices select us in the
Agreed.
business world. When particularly when something goes wrong in whatever it is you're doing, whether you get fired or whether you lose your business, at that particular moment, I wouldn't say that you have to make choices as to which one do I select. At that point, you start looking everywhere. How did I get back on my feet? We all know that success is really a combination of hard work and discipline and effort combined with a little bit of luck. And if you happen to put those together, you have a good chance of moving forward into the next stage of your life and into the next chapter. If you're sitting around not trying, not talking to people, not asking around what's out there, what are the possibilities, your luck is not going to show up. So I have to admit that I got a little lucky in finding subsequent opportunities, but I was looking for that luck every day, getting up early, talking to people. I'm not going to lie and say that had I not been offered a really good job opportunity, that I wouldn't have taken it. It just didn't show up. More opportunities in the entrepreneurship world showed up because people wanted my talent that didn't have money. I never got offered an executive position and got my future might have changed. But I had friends, young friends as well at the time, or different ages, that either owned a business that was troubled or multiple businesses and needed some help. Let's go to real estate because there were a dozen different experiences that I went through. But in the real estate world, it happened to be my brother, who was still younger than me at the time, had graduated. He loved the construction business. He loved residential construction. He became an architect, and he really wanted to start a home building company. So it was a natural fit. I had the business experience. He had the technical background. He had already dabbled in, he worked as a plan checker at the city, and he got to understand the fundamentals. So we got together. I became the business side of things and him the technical. I figured out how to put a few dollars together to buy our first property and figured out it was not easy getting our first loan. I was running out of money, but somehow we put it together. We sold the first house, and then we went to two and to four, and so in. And there's a story. Before you know it, we're building a couple of hundred homes, in excess of 100 million a year. But it started with a tiny investment, a lot of risk, a lot of work, a lot of patience, frugality. Not spending, reinvesting every dollar for many years, and eventually the business grew. But that opportunity came to me when I was pretty desperate too. I was trying to figure out what was the next step, and that one happened to fall on my lap, and I didn't have many other ones. Yes, I was still trying to. I was still a partner in a couple of other things, but I was running out of money. So we had to pretty much start from scratch, and we started with one tiny little bungalow here in a neighborhood in Houston that eventually took off. Timing was right. The effort was there, the discipline that we put into the business. But I really thought there were moments there that I did not know what I was going to do and how I was going to figure out how to pay the bills. So it did get scary several times. Oh, and it went on. I mean, even once we built this business, we got hit by the financial crisis of 2008, which destroyed us. We caught us way over leveraged, and it was a massive blow that also almost puts us out of business again, to the point where we had to rebuild the business from scratch one more time after that. The number of years that this crisis affected us.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because anyone that's, you know, been in the real estate market for more than 10, 20 years has talked about 2008. And that was a horrible time for everyone in the industry, not just, you know, manufacturers and people building the homes, but the loan officers and the people behind the scenes as well in that industry got hurt. I was actually a loan officer at that time, and when the market changed, we went from going from, I was doing about 30 loans a month down to about five. And that was right in that 2008 window. And as a new build construction home person, that had to be, I'm sure you had homes an area that you've built that you just couldn't sell. And that probably had a lot to do with the need to rebuild. Can you maybe talk about that time frame and what happened to you and how you were able to recover?
Sure, this was a very difficult time, and it happened overnight. It particularly in our industry, I don't think anybody was aware of what was happening. It was surreal because for us in the construction business, it started sooner than 2008. I will never forget when approximately May of 2007, our CFO, would walk in pretty much every month to discuss with me the results. And we had made a normal month. We were making a bunch of money, $600,000 in net profits a month. Came in, gave me the results. Everything was good. Obviously, the business was starting to get difficult finding lots. Everything was beginning to get overpriced, but the business was still moving. But it began to slow down in other states. Banks were starting to notice. Credit started to all of a sudden be eliminated from a lot of sectors of our industry. Within 1 month, I remember it vividly, from May to June. By the next month, to our surprise, we lost about the same amount, 500 or 600. That was about $1.2 million or so swing in 30 days,
Wow.
just between what the business was generating in net profits. Uh, and that was catastrophic. I did not know what happened overnight. It's like they turn off the switch for buyers, traffic, credit, approvals. Everything went to hell overnight. And from that point on, it remained like that. Eventually, this thing turned into a global phenomenon in a financial crisis that affected every sector. But it started with single family residential. That's where it hit initially. It At that point, it was amazing because a lot of the banks, we were still paying interest, we were still doing well, we were still very bankable. We had a lot of equity in all of our projects. We were financially healthy, but banks started coming to us, letting us know that they were about to call notes. It was nothing to do with us, but the banking industry was changing. So they started calling us, coming to us, letting us know that they would not only stop lending us, but also require repayment. And this is where things got very, very difficult. We started juggling loans and juggling debt and trying to figure out. I remember selling houses. We had a couple of hundred homes on the ground, plus a few hundred lots being developed. And it was certainly the most difficult period of time in my life. So we were just trying to figure out how to make it one day at a time, how to move to the next stage without going out of business. And we got pretty close many times where we were just not able to raise enough cash in negotiating with everyone just to wait, to work with us. So it happens to all of us. And I think this is the tricky part. How do you handle and maneuver, navigate through these periods of time? Any good CEO can navigate through success and can manage a company when things are doing well. But can you manage the lack of resources in a horrible market when more money is going out than the amount that's coming in? That's where it gets very tricky. And it teaches you much more. That's where you learn how business is supposed to be conducted and what business is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And thank you so much also for your sort of transparency throughout this conversation. I think it's really important for people to hear, sort of the stories of failure and those kinds of things. I mean, we don't want to dwell on them, of course, but I think it's important for people to be able to relate to experiences in their own life that, that they're maybe in a situation that isn't so uncommon, that a lot of people experience these same things in entrepreneurial ventures. So I appreciate you taking the
Extremely
time to talk
scary
about that.
moments, and I don't hope any entrepreneur to have to go through them. But if you do, and you go through them, one advice I give, entrepreneurs of all sectors and ages, when things are good, when times are booming, and your market is growing, and your business is expanding, you can think long term, ahead of you can be forecasting and planning and designing things. When the business goes in the opposite direction and things get horrible, you stop thinking long term and you begin to think one day at a time. You begin to develop your ability to fix the immediate problems just to get you by little and start getting out of the situation. So you go from long term thinking to very short term thinking. And that helped me. One big thing is that we skip the denial phase. A lot of businessmen and women, they don't believe when things start going well. They think they're going to turn around and correct themselves very easily or very quickly. One of the smart things that we did, and I brought some of the experience from other businesses that were cyclical as well, was to react quickly, to take your losses quickly. We began to unload assets and debt. So many people got stubborn and did not want to sell at cost or below cost. I remember bringing cash to a lot of closings just to pay off the bank. So we diluted our wealth every month after month. We started losing money and diluting our savings and our equity. But it's what saved our business. We didn't sit around until we drowned. That's something I always recommend. If things get tough, act quickly. Do not procrastinate. Understand the problem. Evaluate the cost of the issue and the crisis and the economic change or particular circumstance of your business. But start doing things immediately. Don't just wait and think that things are going to fix themselves. So this is where a CEO needs to come in and start making some very difficult decisions, cutting back, start laying off people. All of those were very emotional, but were necessary. And I really attribute our ability to survive in that business to making very, very quick decisions and unloading weight just so that we could live to see another day. And it worked,
That's
but it was
that's
terrifying.
that's something that a lot of people don't discuss or really even talk about, or and the fact that you would show up to a closing with cash to pay the bank off, even though you're supposed to be the guy that's making cash in the transaction because you spent all that time building the home and everything. that's really deflating. But acknowledging the fact that, maybe losing 20 grand or 30 grand or however much you had to end up paying the bank to get out of that note is cheaper in the long run than hanging on to it and then just bleeding money, and in hopes that the market will rebound and you'll be able to get that, profit on your transaction instead of the loss. And being able to free up that equity and not have that over your head, that
Yeah.
that's smart. That's real smart, and a lot of
It's
people don't
painful,
talk about
but
that.
I always say that it's okay to lose all your money, but you don't want to lose your credit. You don't want to go through a bankruptcy where now you're not going to be able to get back on your feet, because that will stay recorded on your history for life, and you'll have to disclose that. So it's okay to lose money. It's painful. It's very difficult, and none of us want it to happen, but it allows you to get back on your feet and start again. And this is the nature, getting back to entrepreneurship, that a lot of people don't understand. CEOs, for example, of big corporations, if the company goes south and something goes wrong, they walk away with their millions and billions. They already made money. That's their money. As a business owner, as an entrepreneur, no, sir. You lose business or equity or something goes wrong, you have to put your money back into your business to salvage whatever it is that's there. So you don't just make money. You keep the accountability and the responsibility and the stress that goes with you along with a business, even in the long term. So
Yeah.
unless you sell it, unless you have an exit strategy, but while you're still on the roulette table, while your chips are still on the table, whether you're making money or not, you are still responsible and your money is still at risk.
Yeah.
So new builds, and there's a lot of different approaches you can take into real estate and the construction in that world. You got your new builds, you got your flips, you got your remodels, you've got your commercial properties like the apartments, and you actually even have, like office spaces and different things. Um, it sounds like you started off as a developer, and your business model was to build and sell. And at the start of our conversation, I think you mentioned that you're getting into more commercial prospects, like apartments and stuff like that. Did you pivot your real estate business into more holding and the passive income through rent and stuff like that? Or are you still doing more flips and stuff like that? Has your business model changed in real estate?
Yes, my business model has changed. I always recommend that when you're new in business, when you start, when you're undercapitalized, focus on one thing, do one thing, become good at it, become the best at it, and start making money, because there's always a learning curve. Real estate, it's just like being an attorney or a doctor. There's specialties, commercial and real, multifamily and single family and multi-million and industrial and shopping centers. They all work differently, and there's a know-how, there's a price tag to pay in understanding each one of those sectors. So when you're new, focus on one, become an expert, know what you're doing. But once you start making money and once you start putting a nest egg aside, that's when you can begin to diversify. This time around, once we rebuild the business, we stumble across rental income accidentally. This is an interesting story. We were always looking for teardowns for our next residential development. So
Okay.
we would buy this Class D apartments from little ones, 12 units, 18 units, 40 units. Sometimes, we would buy 100 plus units, but always at dirt price, at land prices, because our intentions were to tear them down and build a community. Over time, we started realizing that some of these older apartment complexes were making money. And we're like, well, wait a second. Let's just start with the ones that are already demolished and cleared, and let's leave those to the back of the line. And little by little, we started keeping some of those. apartment complexes and duplexes and communities of different sizes. We never intentionally went after the multifamily, but little by little we started remodeling some of them and improving the tenant base, and we realized that that was a whole nother model. And yes, over time we began to evolve in understanding other parts of real estate, but it was a very slow process that took years. We didn't just jump into different areas of real estate overnight. It was a process that took a couple of decades. And little by little, we started understanding them and investing in other things. So now we have a little bit of everything, but we're still heavily involved in single family communities. And now we do a lot of land development for these communities, also selling lots, what we call shovel ready lots for other developers. We retain some for our own consumption, for our own construction company, and then we sell some others to developers that are in the same business that are ready to build, and they want land in lots that are ready to be built on.
Love that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I wonder if we can circle back a little bit to sort of the theme of our conversation, in which you've demonstrated through some of your storytelling, back to this notion of resiliency. So we spent a lot of time talking about sort of, I don't know, entrepreneurial mindset and the way that people need to be resilient, and there's going to be these ups and downs and stuff like that. And I think it's easy to say, obviously, and it's easier to say than to have lived it, and you can attest to that. But I wonder, do you think, is this a skill set in terms of just sort of developing grit, developing mental strength? Like, do you think that that's something that can be developed in a entrepreneur that maybe, wants to get into entrepreneurship, doesn't have a lot of experience? Or do you think that it's sort of something that's just in you? And so there's sort of a group of people who are more naturally inclined to entrepreneurship versus people who aren't?
Wow, that's a great question. The question of all questions is an entrepreneur made, or is an entrepreneur born? Is someone with the right characteristics to tolerate risk, pressure, pain, adversity? I think both can work, but I would be more inclined to say that you have to have some of those characteristics in your nature. I grew up with a lot of adversity, and in my opinion, if you have one of those lives or stories that were difficult throughout the years, you start developing that ability, that tolerance. Then if you've had a very consistent life that repels that risk and that gamble and the uncertainty, because there is a lot of uncertainty. Even today, after close to 40 years of being an entrepreneur, I'm still facing those uncertainties. Our debt is greater. Our businesses are larger. Interest rates change. The political environment changes. And even today, I still have sleepless nights. So you have to get accustomed to it and understand if that's the life choice that you want. Another way to look at it is, if you have the ambition, and if you really, really are stubborn and convinced about your willingness and desire to make something out of your life and to make money, I think naturally you will understand that it comes with a little bit of pain and a lot of risk. But to answer the question, I do believe that you have to be born with a little bit of that nature and that personality.
And I would just sort of add to
yeah.
a thought that's sort of based on your experience, actually, which is something you mentioned when you sort of had to shutter your first company and you were moving on to the next and rolling into the next business. Rather than being dissuaded, you were willing to take that failure, learn from it, and move forward. But you said something in particular that made me think, as it applies to sort of the journey of the entrepreneur, which is about being open to opportunity. I think one thing we've discovered on this show, you might be our nearly 400th interview. We're talking to a lot of business leaders and people like that. And over the years, the one thing that we've sort of uncovered, and it's an obvious truth, but I think it's something we don't see in social media and sort of our fast-paced world, is the notion of the 10-year overnight success. Right. So it's really easy to look at somebody's, millions of dollars and their, success at the end. But, a lot of people don't really put a lot of thought into all the steps along the way, which we're spending a lot of time talking about on this episode. I
Yeah.
think that, you know, resiliency and sort of just that being open to the next opportunity and be ready for the next thing for a person who maybe isn't inborn with this, willingness to tolerate risk or whatever else. But I think by walking around with an open mind or being open to opportunity, by just that, I think you're set up to be almost become an entrepreneur and chase something down. And I think that this notion that there's like a roadmap or a plan for becoming a successful entrepreneur can start to go away. And if I was to say that there's a plan at all, it's that being open to opportunity and being willing to pursue something versus standing around and this didn't go right to my plan, or I wrote this down when I was 10 and now I'm following or executing on the plan. Instead I was open to opportunity and therefore I was able to find success. What do you think of that as sort of just a general notion, or as sort of a nugget of maybe a entrepreneurial mindset, which is just being open to opportunity and the value of that?
Well, let's start with the fact that we all want to be the boss. We all want to be the owner. We want to run the show until it's time to act like the boss and take the good and the bad. We envision the guy at the top, flying in the private jets and driving the nice cars and living in the nice mansions. We envision that part very well, but we don't envision the endless days, the headaches, and all the other things, the endless number of days when you're tired and you've been working 10, 12 hours, and that's when your day begins, because now you finish dealing with everybody. Now it's your turn to start your work, with which you never got around to all day because of all the distractions. This part of this life not everybody sees, and you have to know that it comes with it. I feel like through my business life, I've been very humble and never gotten arrogant or too confident in the world of business. And when things have gone wrong, I've taken opportunities that are not necessarily very appealing or very sexy at that moment. So, to answer your question, when I've gotten back on my feet, I've taken opportunities that at that moment were not that attractive. It's not like somebody offered me a percentage of a business that was already established. So I had to be humble enough to understand my new reality, my new position, and to start again in any opportunity that was presented to me, that I thought I could turn it into something. So that was part of it. And the personality comes with forgetting all distractions. When you get back to starting from scratch, you have to put aside friends, you have to put aside distractions, fun, weekends, evenings. And if you go in with that mindset that I'm here to make something happen and I better focus not just for a day or for a week as if it was a project, or if I was a movie star where I have to work really, really hard, 20 hours a day while the movie is being filmed, and then I can go on vacation. No, this is an ongoing pressure that goes month after month after year. Like you said it very clearly, it takes 10 to 15 years to become an overnight success, and very tough 10 to 15 years before something starts coming together. And during that period of time, you are so intensely involved that the time kind of goes by fast. That's what I've seen while I'm building businesses, that I immerse myself to a level where I don't know where the years went by, but I wake up, I snap out of it 3, 4, 5 years later, and the business is starting to react in certain ways that I anticipated. But I don't even remember. I have flashbacks as to how it all happened. So during that period of time, you better focus, and more than a few days at a time. Just put your lives aside and immerse yourself into it. That's how successful people get there eventually.
Very true. It's one of those things. I'm sure we're contemporary in age. give or take a decade. But the older
You
I
guys
get,
look
the
young.
faster it goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing how fast time actually flies. I'll look at shows that we've done, or events that we've promoted back in the day, and it feels like it was just yesterday, and it was 10 years ago. And a decade goes by overnight, and from what I've heard, it just goes quicker and quicker and quicker. And especially when you get to the point when you are immersed in it, or like a flow state or something like that, when it's fun for you, when you enjoy getting up and doing your work, and you're working on a project. You say you've got a lot you're developing, and you've got 30 homes you're trying to put on it. That there's a lot of moving parts there, and there's a lot of things that people you talk to, and things you negotiate, and things fires you have to put out here and there. And a lot of people really enjoy that, and that actually makes the time go quicker. But there's also crazy things that come up, left field things like, oh, the interest rates just doubled overnight, now what do we do? Or, oh, the person at the planning department said we can't put this infrastructure in because of rules or laws or whatever. Things come up. Can you maybe talk about like navigating those scenarios and those difficult market changes, and pivoting to, or I guess we've discussed pivoting a few times now, but maybe navigating difficult markets would be the way to go, and maybe a couple of experiences that came up along your path.
I've had, interesting that you say that, I've had several examples where I was very, very close to hitting a home run. I remember even back when I was in the exporting business, I got very, very close to getting a contract for electrical poles, a distributorship. And I won't bore you with the details, but the guy who was in charge, who was about to give me a multi-million-dollar, multi-year contract, was moved to another area, and I had to start from scratch. That happened to me several times. It happened with a transformers company. It happened with this. I don't know if you remember, there used to be prepaid long distance cards. One time I had a huge contract, I was going to retire out of this one. And in each one of these deals, I worked for months at a time, sometimes years. So these famous prepaid cards that I had the exclusive distributorship never came out after I invested a bunch of time and money. That has happened to me a number of times. Over my career, I have to admit that I have not had that beautiful moment of a home run. Let's call it, when you see a company ring the bell at the floor, doing their IPO, and all of a sudden, in one single transaction, you made a lot of money. My trajectory has been more of a marathon, where the accumulation of steps, before you know it, you turn back and you go, oh gosh, I've done all that, I've gone this far. But meanwhile, all you feel is one step at a time. You don't feel the progress. Most of the businesses that I've been involved with, I've never invented anything. I've never innovated in a new way of doing things. I've always been in very competitive industries where I have to somehow differentiate myself. And I've done it by just being persistent and going and understanding that it's just small steps that accumulate. And one day I start turning them into something. But I haven't had that home run. I haven't had that successful high five day when, oh my God, we just made a ton of money and I think we're set. It's been through just baby steps and a lot of work. But I've been very close to them. I've had a few experiences where I could almost taste it, where, hey, this deal is going to really put us on the map in different industries. I used to own a Italian coffee house that turned into a chain of a number of stores. And we were on to something. We started growing. In one day, overnight, Starbucks started coming in. And instead of us selling the company, while we had 5 or 6 stores and we had nice offers, for example, we got stubborn and said, no, I think we can do better than Starbucks, because we had liquor, we had other products, we had the gelatos and the Italian ice creams, and we had more products. And we thought, no, I think we can do better. We're going to fight this fight. While we could have walked away with a few $1,000,000 in selling this company, we ended up broke. I've had many of those. So not just in real estate, experiences where I could have walked away at the right time and maybe made a little bit of money, or where I was so close to turning them into something very big, but for one reason or another, it just wasn't my turn. It wasn't my time. But again, it happens, and it's part of everybody's journey, just to keep understanding what went right, what didn't work, and how do I try to improve it next time. But that the humbling experience of having to start again, and understanding that you're going to start not anywhere near where you were in your previous experience, it's very tough.
Yeah.
Hopefully
No,
not.
and
Yeah.
I really appreciate your candor on all this, and I know I've said it a couple of times, so thank you for being so transparent with us. I think the story that you just described about sort of just the resilient entrepreneur that just kind of grinds and keeps working, I think that that's probably the more common story in entrepreneurship versus sort of the the unicorn or the person who invented the thing or whatever. Like, of
Yeah.
course, those happen, and there's an occasional giant success story that you see all over social media or whatever. But I think that the lion's share of entrepreneurs share the experience that you just described. And I worked for a guy that was just like this years ago. He's a New York Times bestselling author. Janitorial company is basically his business. And but same thing. Like, I mean, I worked with him until he was well into his 70s. And he was still working late at night and sleeping at the office and getting up in the morning. And his attitude was just, he wasn't ever working for the paycheck. He wasn't doing whatever. Like, he just loved what he did. And so
Yeah.
he pursued this stuff and he chased it down. And it was just, I mean, but that was who he was, like, to his core. Right. So, I wanted to say that just to sort of lead into sort of maybe a brief discussion about sort of just key principles and, kind of looking at your life and your experience in business. And this was the case with this guy. His name was Don Aslett. He actually just passed away recently, but he,
I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
yeah, but he began his career as a young man. He started a janitorial company called Varsity Contractors when he was like in college, and used it just to make money to pay tuition and rent. And, eventually grew that into this big multinational corporation and everything, did really well. And also became an author and all these other things. But all the way from those early days as the farm boy from Twin Falls, Idaho, grew up working on the farm in the 40s and 50s, and, and grew this company. His sort of key principles or his guiding principles didn't really change that much, right? I mean, his business grew, his life changed, everything evolved, but he was still sort of the same guy at the end, right? So he was the hard worker on the farm when he was a child, and he was still sleeping in the office at 75 years old because this is what he loved, and he was willing to put in that kind of work. And the story that you're telling kind of makes me think of this. So I wondered if you kind of just take a quick moment and examine your career over the course of your entrepreneurial life, and just talk about sort of how your key principles, or sort of the things that formed you as a person, have either evolved or not evolved or changed, or, if you can still see a piece of you as a young man, in your present age.
Absolutely. I see a lot of myself. I don't think that I often get asked a question, what will you tell your young self? Yeah. And I haven't changed that much. I'm that hardworking, persistent, responsible, disciplined guy. The only thing that I would tell him is to not worry so much. I've always been a worrier. It's part of my nature. And that makes me a good entrepreneur. I'm always thinking of all the things that can go wrong in business, and it helps me to forecast. I am accused of being a pessimist. In my mind, I'm not negative. I don't have to worry about the things that are going well. Why? Those do not need that much attention. I need to focus on the ones that are going wrong, and I tend to spend a little more time focusing and thinking about those. So the perception I give is that I'm always thinking about all the bad stuff. But that's just my nature. I've always been a person that has struggled through his life, so I'm always waiting for that punch. Where am I going to get hit from? And I'm always trying to plan for it. I love getting back to your one of the points you made. I love talking about adversity because it's rare when things go smooth and when a business just happens as you planned it and success occurs on a straight line. It's very rare. And many entrepreneurs, once they're successful, they get very arrogant and cocky and, oh my God, I'm the best and look how easy this is, and attempt to make something appear that it's not the reality. The reality of owning a business, building a business, growing a business is very difficult, very tedious, and it requires a lot of patience and a certain personality. So I love talking about it because it's the truth. It's, at least like you mentioned, in most cases. So my work ethics hasn't changed. I have a lot of contradictions. For example, in a way, I want to slow down now. I want to start enjoying the fruits of my labor. I want to start taking time off. But there's this side of my brain that doesn't let me. I continue to come up with deals and ideas and concepts. I fight my brain a lot. And I think this is one of the characteristics of an entrepreneur, that you don't allow yourself to take a break. You rationalize the fact that you need time off and you need to go on vacation and you need to just take a break between deals and this and that. But when you have that mindset and that identity of just wanting to create and do things, it's hard to control your brain and shut it down. So I have that contradiction. In one way, I want to start just doing other things that are more pleasurable and easier. But on the other hand, I mean, you look at all the inventors and creators and movers and shakers of the world that have all more money than they'll ever know what to do in several lives, but they keep going. Why? You know, so that must be just a part of someone's nature, I suppose. But I wouldn't change much. I'm just probably going to continue to do this, maybe at a slower pace, but just keep working.
Love it. Well, Jose, we're kind of at that point. You're actually about to release a new book, so I've heard. Maybe you want to tell us about that, and parting shots. Tell people where they can reach out and get in touch with you if they have questions, where they could buy their book.
Sure. I of course I published a book by the name of the Business of Home Building, which is out on Amazon and all the platforms, which is about starting and building a construction company. Very, very specific, but it applies to anyone who wants to start a business because the fundamentals are very similar. It talks a little bit about how to structure your business and what are some of the things that you may not be thinking about while starting one. This second one is a little broader about the real estate industry, about the value, the part that land represents in all of real estate, and how everything begins with a proper selection of a piece of land. Societies and communities and cities and in the world that we live in, the developed world that we live in, started by people going and selecting a piece of land. And how does it happen? And so this is what this new book by the name of Dirt Rich, rich, not only financially, but in culture, in history. So it's a little deeper. It was very, very fun. And now I'm continuing to write. I'm writing another book now, a little broader, about entrepreneurship in general, the mindset, the identity, the personality of an entrepreneur and what it truly means. So this has been a very fun journey, and I plan to continue doing it. They're for sale on Amazon and my website, joseberlanga.com.
Love it.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much, Jose. This has been great.
Ryan and Mike, thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure being here with you.
Absolutely. Thrilled to death to have you. And thanks to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next.